Today's episode is brought to you by Freedom Project Academy. Looking for a K-12 classical online school built on Judeo-Christian values? FPA is enrolling now for the fall. Request your free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.
It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Duke, joined by the one, the only, the unique Katie Petrick. And before we get started, I need you to hit that share button. It's a request, but a nice one, so we can share all of these wonderful stories with other patriots around the country. Today we start with the Joe Biden administration's proposed changes to Title IX. This is unbelievable. This will basically eliminate gender-exclusive college facilities and destroy women's sports to further the LGBTQ agenda. This is utterly, utterly unacceptable. We saw the danger that Barack Obama put this country into when he signed his Dear Colleague memo, in which young men on college campuses were no longer given constitutional rights to defend themselves. Any young man that was accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault was not able to see the evidence against him. He was not able to have his lawyer present. He was not able to confront his accuser. And now this same extremist behavior, this anti-constitutional approach to dealing with people under Title IX is going to happen if Joe Biden does what he says he's about to do, which means to add added protections, civil rights protections, specifically for LGBTQ to Title IX. Now remember, Title IX used to be women's right to play sports. How do we get from the right of women to play college athletics to this abomination now?
How did we get from woman to what is a woman? It's the same thing, but we're at that point in our history, and so it makes perfect sense, obviously, for the Biden administration. I'm not going to say Biden himself, because we're not so sure he knows what's even going on. He doesn't know what a woman is. He doesn't even know who he is. So it's the Biden administration that's pushing for all of this, and it's all coming under Title IX. All these changes we keep talking about last week, I think, and the week before all that, we keep talking about how your school may not get federal funding for lunches for your children if you don't agree with what we say at the Biden administration and how we're going to change Title IX. And everything is about Title IX. And so they have a whole list of changes, and one of the proposed changes actually says it would make clear that preventing any person from participating in an education program or activity consistent with their gender identity would subject them to more than de minimis harm on the basis of sex and therefore be prohibited unless otherwise permitted by Title IX or the regulations. Now, the fact that they're trying to push all of these out there, and it's all for LGBTQIA soup, alphabet soup plus, and none of it's for women. That's what's so just infuriating. As a woman, a self-identified, cisgender, whatever the terminology is, as a woman.
And it's funny, isn't it? You're right. The irony is that Title IX was created for women, and now the entire changes to Title IX are to freeze women out of their protected status.
Because we can't even define what a woman is. It's just sad. It's just sad.
It's more than sad. It's criminal.
And it is criminal. Now, if this is adopted, the rule change, it would bar universities, we keep hitting on this point, it would bar universities and other federally funded institutions from maintaining men's and women's sports in sex-segregated spaces like locker rooms and dormitories. As we have said almost, 3-4 times a week on this show, the necessity for having separate locker rooms, separate facilities for men and women, because guess what? Men and women, especially at the younger ages, at the teenage level, at the college level, they're different. So you need to separate them. But no, not in our land anymore. We're just going to say everybody in the pool, if you will.
And I think it's even worse than that. If you're a transgender athlete who wants to play at the University of Alabama's football team, and you go to the two coaches, you say, hey, I want a spot on this team, do you have to earn it, or denied that, theoretically, if you are denied a spot on Alabama's football team as a woman, can't they sue you? Can't you sue under Title IX now? You just read the statute, right? Mm-hmm. That they must be allowed to do everything that anybody else can. Well, if you're a transgender male to female, or female to male for that point, and you get rejected from the football team, even if you're not any good at football, aren't you being denied what they just said you have to be able to participate in?
Yes, but what's interesting is we set the college level. We've not seen the female to male. It's always male to female because these males are mediocre at best in their sports, and so they view it as an opportunity. Prove to me I'm wrong. They view it as an opportunity. They're going to get all this press. They're going to get money. They're going to get book deals. They're going to make a buck. And then what's going to happen? I'm putting it out there right now. I'm predicting 15 years from now, what's going to happen to all these male to female transgender athletes? They're going to have gone back to being male. And then they're going to get in the spotlight again because they're going to say mental health. And then they're going to get all the publicity and get a book deal about how mental health in this country needs to be improved. And so they're going to score twice on this. See if I did that score like sports. And they're going to get paid both times for it.
And we've already seen the consequence of this at the Department of Justice. This is basically what's happening is that Joe Biden, his administration, is going to weaponize Title IX to force transgender acceptance at every level, and anytime you deny a transgender anything, it's something that can be litigated. The problem with this is we've already seen at the Department of Justice what happens. How many times have we seen in the last couple of months male criminals, oftentimes very vicious, including rapists, men who've raped women, who, when they get arrested and sent down the road to the prison, they suddenly identify as female inmates. And therefore, even though they have raped women, which is part of the reason why they're in jail, they now get to matriculate in the women's prison, not the much more violent, much more dangerous, much more bloody federal men's penitentiaries, but the women's one, alongside with even female cellmates these rapists end up with, all because they changed their gender miraculously during the time they were arrested from the time they were serving their sentence.
Well, and that's why we're saying this is the Biden administration, because the Department of Justice to the Department of Education, where you have the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, everyone's favorite Secretary of Education, right, Dr. Duke?
Yeah, I wish he was just a secretary somewhere.
Anyway, he said that these proposed changes would fully protect students from all forms of sex discrimination. We don't even know what sex is.
And it doesn't protect women from being discriminated against, does it? Because
anyway,
you can take their jobs.
Sorry for us to interject into Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona's answer. Fully protect students from all forms of sex discrimination instead of limiting some protections to sexual harassment alone. And make clear those protections include discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, but not sex.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your app store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
Well, we have a senator named John Cornyn from Texas. You may have heard of him, Johnny Crack Corn, and I don't care. He has reintroduced the Civics Secures Democracy Act. Ooh, it sounds so nice, doesn't it? Civics Secures Democracy Act. And it would allow federal government to impose critical race theory on public schools by way of federal grants. See, anytime they name something that sounds like civics, secures democracy, it's must be great. No. So it's being co-sponsored by GOP Senators Jim Inhofe and Bill Cassidy and Representative Tom Cole. And they're pretty crafty about it and how they put all the wording in here to impose the CRT on the public schools. The legislation provides for $6 billion in federal grants to states, nonprofit organizations, institutions of higher education, and researchers to improve civics and American history education. That sounds great. Primarily, it would be for traditionally underserved students. Even better. But I said it was crafty, didn't I? Now, the bill makes clear the grant applications must demonstrate how the applicant intends to prioritize the education of such students. And so this was rolled out last year and again this year. And as the National Review actually said, the revised version of the CSDA only seems to eliminate its radical political elements. And once you understand the latest educational lingo, it's obvious that this bill will allow the Biden administration to nationalize critical race theory. The danger is that naive Republicans, unfamiliar with leftist education theories and eager to associate themselves with anything labeled civics, will be duped into co-sponsoring this disastrous bill.
This is not, first of all, these are so-called Republicans. Almost every one of these. This reminds me when Paul Ryan of Wisconsin forced through the ESSA Act that legitimized Common Core way back at the end of Obama's term. And now you have Republicans doing the same thing. They're carrying water for the progressives here. And they use the word underserved, right? So when we're going to give your kids a civics lesson, it's not going to be actual history or civics. It's going to be from the perspective of underserved kids. In other words, Black Lives Matter types, that's what they're doing here, right? We're going to teach kids that version of American history, how white rage and white privilege and white supremacy is the whole of the American story and nothing else. It gets even worse. Stanley Kurtz at the National Review is one of the great critics of this. He went on to say that the most important bit of misdirection in this revised CSDA, and there are several, revolves around the term underserved. The bill directs the Secretary of Education to prioritize grant proposals from states, nonprofit organizations, and universities that meet the needs of traditionally underserved, especially students in rural and inner-city urban areas or underrepresented minorities. Similarly, the bill instructs the Secretary of Education to prioritize grants that will, quote, close gaps in civic knowledge and achievement among traditionally unserved students, unquote, which is all one big fancy way of saying the lying, dishonest, and completely debunked 1619 curriculum and garbage like it that is nothing more than politics masquerading as history and civics.
And the way he says it after that, he says by itself, that does sound fine. He says, to the untutored ear, the revised CSDA simply directs federal grants in civics and history towards districts that have historically been underfunded. If poor minority students score less well on standardized tests for knowledge of civics and history, why not give them money to bolster their access to this sort of education? Undoubtedly, this is what potential Republican co-sponsors think when they read the priority criteria written into this bill. So what that's all saying is that at least at at all levels, but especially at the federal level, when these bills get put forth by all these bureaucrats and it's all these little leftists trying to get in what they want, they're going to maneuver and massage the wording to make it seem like, well, of course this is something everyone would want to do. You want it, have civics, and you want the underserved to be served. Except then you get to the truth of the matter.
Well, Cornyn, actually does know the danger of all of this, but he is irritated by people like Kurtz in the National Review. He tweeted, quote, the false hysterical claims are untrue and worthy of a Russian active measures campaign, not a serious discussion of our bill. Because we don't have all kinds of evidence, do we, Mr. Cornyn, that radical leftist Marxist theory is being put in your kids' schools.
And just so everyone knows, this bill has been introduced, but nothing has been scheduled, and at this point, we hope it stays that way.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
We recently learned that the U.S. Navy is all about their pronouns, so of course then why not have West Point care all about teaching our cadets, the finest cadets, critical race theory. We talked about this happening in the past, but now we have 2 lawsuits that have been filed against the Department of Defense for failing to respond to the conservative legal group Judicial Watch for failing to send the information on it. So organizations like Judicial Watch are out there actually, watching things judiciously and filing Freedom of Information Acts to get documents to prove what's actually been going on, especially here at West Point. And then when West Point, or Department of Defense in this instance, obviously, doesn't respond, well, then you got a lawsuit on your hands, and that's what we have. We have records that were obtained through 2 Judicial Watch Freedom of Information Act lawsuits against the U.S. Department of Defense, which were filed after they failed to respond to requests for records concerning critical race theory training at West Point. It's Judicial Watch versus the U.S. Department of Defense. And emails related to such training of Daryl A. Williams, the superintendent, the United States Military Academy, Mark C. Quander, commandman, U.S. Corps of Cadets, U.S. Military Academy, and Michael J. Coffey, who's a former U.S. Military Academy senior enlisted leader. So there's a lot of people who are getting called out on this, as they should.
And the Judicial Watch has now obtained 518 pages and another 135 pages of records revealing critical race theory being taught at West Point. One training slide said, quote, "Modern-day slavery in the USA." Another slide is titled "Critical Race Theory and Policy," and instructed cadets that racism is ordinary. Race is socially constructed, and white Americans have primarily benefited from civil rights legislation. How could that be true? According to the left, the whites have always had civil rights, but minorities have never had. So how is it possible then, with all these civil rights that have came down to minority organizations and groups, how could you argue that only whites benefit from this? This kind of lying, backward, Marxist history is being treated as if it were absolutely normal, that the only way we could teach minority kids is if we teach them to hate their country.
Whoa, Dr. Duke. I mean, this Marxist thinking. Our United States Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you listen to what he has to say about Marxist thinking.
On the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand, and I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that, because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories.
What's offensive, sir, is, you've read Marx and Mao Zedong, and Vladimir Lenin, and you're going to make our kids at the cadets read them. But you know what you're not going to have them read? Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and all the rest of the founding fathers, because you've deemed them racist. The problem, sir, you call yourself not a communist. I've read all the communists and I'm not a communist. Well, wait a minute. You're engaging in communist history. You believe that we only have to teach kids what the progressive left says, the radical critical race theory. Nowhere will you provide them with the actual version or an alternative version of American history. So in that sense, sir, you may be too stupid to realize it, but you are a socialist because you're engaging in and forcing our cadets to study only radical, revisionist, socialist history.
All right, before we go, we're going to take a little time to cool our heads and fill you in on some of the other stories that we've been following. And we're starting in the crime-ridden city of Chicago, where it appears criminals will be able to get away with practically anything is, hey, as long as you can outrun the cops. The newly updated policy now encourages police officers to stop pursuing suspects on foot if the suspect is carrying a gun. The suspect enters a building or some type of structure, or if the officer already knows the identity of the suspect. Just stop. Stop pursuing. Now, Chicago already has some of the strictest gun control laws in the country, and according to the World Population Review, it is one of the most dangerous cities to live in. So congratulations, Chicago PD. It looks like you and Mayor Lori Lightfoot are making great strides completely to destroy another leftist bastion alongside the San Francisco, the LA, the DC, and the New York City. Now, we're going to go from spilling blood to denying blood. It's a little bit of a weird transition, but after Mr. Sinclair, who has donated more than 100 pints of blood over 50 years, is no longer able to do so. Why? It's because he's 66 years old? No, that's not it. It's actually because the clinic can't take his blood donation until they know if this man is pregnant. This story takes place in Scotland, and according to NHS England, all potential donors are asked if they are pregnant to promote inclusiveness. Watch the latest ad.
We're proud to maintain one of the safest blood supplies in the world for patients. Led by scientific evidence, we're constantly evolving what we do, which is why from the 14th of June, we're changing the rules for everyone. Whether you can donate blood will still be based on questions about your health, travel, and sexual behavior. But now, for the first time, everyone will be asked the same gender-neutral questions in our most inclusive donation experience yet.
Now, when Mr. Sinclair told the nurse the question of being pregnant didn't apply to him, he was met with an ultimatum of either answering all of the questions or get out. What is most interesting is that Scotland recently launched a massive campaign to find 16,000 new blood donors after losing many during the pandemic. Not sure this is the best PR to highlight that campaign. Duke, any thoughts on this one?
How in the world do you brag about how this is all based on science when you're asking men who've donated for the last 50 years whether or not they're pregnant and denying them the ability to donate, which is what your whole program is about, because they refuse to answer the stupid and unscientific question you have asked them. This is, if there's one thing to be grateful about being an American, and there's not a lot anymore when you watch these lefty videos anyway, is how much more ridiculous Europe is than this. I mean, we're on our way to that, but there's nothing like listening to Eurocrats from the EU or from England or Scotland to make you realize that, there's a place in the world where it's even dumber than we are.
Well, I don't listen to Eurocrats, but I listen to Eurovision. Anyway, we're going to wrap things up with everyone's favorite satire site. We've picked our favorite Babylon Bee headlines to see which one should be crowned numero uno. And we're starting with Democrats announce January 6th hearings on ICE. Next, we have the Vatican promises next pope will be a woman of color. Merriam-Webster replaces definition of woman with shrug emoji. Then you have after Lightyear bombs, Disney quietly cancels their upcoming movie, Brokeback Woody. And finally, when I was your age, gas was $2 a gallon, says guy to his buddy who's 1 year younger than him. Duke, what do you pick as the top one this week?
You know, honestly, I don't think the four of them aren't up to the usual standards of the Bee. I'm sorry to say that I think that they're amusing, but they're not laugh out loud funny. So maybe today I'm going to defer to you. Which one was the one that moved you the most?
Well, Brokeback Woody being canceled made me laugh out loud when I first read it. Because if you're of my generation, when Brokeback Mountain came out and everyone was all about Brokeback Mountain, and I'm like, I don't care. But Brokeback Woody, I'm not sorry to see you go.
You can't quit it.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this segment. More to come next time.
And that's going to do it for this show. For all of us at Freedom Project, we urge you, beg you, and suggest that you stay educated, my friends.